Welcome to Sonara's Deep Dive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unpack complex foundational source material and really try to distill its most essential insights for you.
Today, we're taking on a tradition that is, I think, often referenced, but, well, rarely understood on its own terms. We're doing a deep exploration of Zoroastrianism.
And the sources for this are just formidable. We're looking at everything from the prophets' ancient hymns, the Gathas, to these, really dense scholarly debates.
Absolutely. Debates over textual corruption, imperial legal codes from the Sasanian era, and these incredible epic narratives of resilience and diaspora. It's a huge range.
The history here is just staggering. I mean, we're talking about a faith that didn't just exist. It actively shaped the entire legal, cosmic, and moral landscape of ancient Iran for centuries.
And the sources show us so clearly that its foundational ideas, things like individual judgment after death, a distinct heaven and hell, the world's final renovation. Exactly, Freshokredi. All of this served as a kind of theological blueprint for later faiths.
Which is the ultimate payoff for you, the listener. Recognizing that so many concepts we almost take for granted in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam have these deep, traceable roots right here.
It really is a cornerstone of world religion. So our mission today is pretty clear. We need to break down the sometimes overwhelming divine structure, Ahura Mazda, the Amesha, the Azatas.
And then trace the incredibly complicated history of the sacred scriptures themselves, the Avesta.
It's time to lay out that blueprint, and we have to start where all of creation begins in this worldview, with the absolute foundational dualism that drives the entire cosmic structure.
So at the very, very top of this hierarchy stands Ahura Mazda, the wise lord.
Correct. And our sources, from the Avesta to royal Achaemenid inscriptions, like those of Darius the Great, they all define him as this universal, transcendent, all-good, and uncreated supreme creator.
The great god who created the earth, the heaven, man.
Yeah.
The one whose will maintains Arda, which is this concept of cosmic and social order.
Yes. And right away, we hit the most fascinating theological distinction, and it's something you find in the Gathas, the oldest texts.
Okay.
Ahura Mazda is omniscient. He's all-knowing. But he is specifically not omnipotent.
Not all-powerful.
Right.
And that single detail defines the entire universe here, doesn't it?
It changes everything.
Because if he were all-powerful, he would, by definition, be the source of all things, and that includes evil. So this limitation actually preserves his goodness.
That is the key insight. The Gathic distinction ensures Ahura Mazda is never, ever responsible for the suffering or chaos in the world. He didn't create it. He can't just wish it away.
He's placed in eternal opposition to a force that's just as primal as he is.
Exactly. Existing independently, co-eternally, is Angra Mainyu, or Ahriman, as he's known in later texts.
Yeah.
The destructive, malevolent spirit.
And he exists in darkness and ignorance.
The polar opposite. The two forces have always existed separately. They manifest contrary substances. You have life versus non-life, light versus darkness, truth versus the lie, or Druj.
So it sets up this central, unceasing cosmic conflict. This is not a fallen angel story where evil is a corruption of good. This is an eternal, independent opposition.
A true dualism. And it makes the universe a battleground, with humanity placed right in the middle, and our choices. Our choices are the ammunition?
Every choice matters. It tips the scale one way or the other.
That's everything. Now, moving down from Ahura Mazda, we meet let's call them the core team that helps channel his influence into the world.
The Amesha,
Yeah.
the Holy Immortals.
Yes. And your question might be, are they separate gods or something else?
That was exactly my question. Are they like a pantheon, or are they aspects of the one god?
The sources are pretty clear. They're best understood as emanations, or aspects of Ahura Mazda himself. Think of them like attributes of the Supreme Being, but given personality and function.
So they serve a dual purpose then?
A dual purpose, exactly. They are the guardians of the seven creations: sky, water, earth, fire, plants, animals, and man. But they're also the models for the ideal personality that every believer should strive for.
I love how the sources provide this really clear schematic for understanding them. They group these 6 immortals into what we can think of as dual triads. It makes it much easier to grasp.
It does. It's a very elegant structure. The first triad is what you might call the father aspect. It's associated with Ahura, and it's grammatically neuter.
We start with Asha.
Asha. This is so much more than just truth. It's divine will, it's righteousness, it's the cosmic order itself. It is the absolute principle that stands against chaos and the lie, the Druj.
So it's like the ethical axis on which the entire universe is supposed to turn.
A perfect way to put it. Then you have Vohumano,
The good mind. Or love.
The good mind. This is the quality you need to even perceive Ahura Mazda. You can't reach the wise Lord without first cultivating this state of being. It's the prerequisite for enlightenment.
And the third in that triad.
Ekshatra, which means dominion or strength. This is the quality that ensures the final victory of good. It's the strength to maintain a righteous rule, which is why it's often associated physically with the sky or with heaven itself.
Okay, so that's the father aspect. Now, the mother aspect triad, associated with Mazda, feminine in gender.
And this begins with Almighty, devotion, or wisdom.
And it's fascinating. The sources often pair Almighty with Asha in the Gathas. It's like they're suggesting that wisdom and devotion are how you put that cosmic order into practice in your own life.
They work hand in glove. You can't have one without the other. True order requires devoted wisdom.
And the final two are very connected to the physical world.
Very much so. You have Hardawatat, which is perfection, and she presides specifically over water, maintaining its purity and its life-giving properties.
Which we'll see becomes incredibly important in their rituals.
Absolutely. And finally, Amaratatat, immortality. And she represents plants and vegetation.
The idea that divinity is literally present in the physical elements of the world. That's profound. It's not an abstract concept. The spiritual attributes are safeguarding the physical earth.
It connects everything. It connects ritual directly to theology. So when a Zoroastrian works to keep water pure or protects plant life, they are literally, in a cosmic sense, helping Hardawatat and Amaratat in their divine tasks.
Ahura Mazda is immanent. He's interacting with creation through these immortals.
Exactly, but we're not done with the hierarchy. Below the Amesha-Spentas, the cosmology gets even more complex with the Azatas.
The beings worthy of worship.
Right. The Azatas are this league of countless good powers serving under Ahura Mazda. They are the field commanders in the war against Ahriman.
So if the Amesha-Spentas are emanations of God, what are the Azatas?
They're better classified as hypostases. Personifications of moral virtues or physical aspects of creation. Later on, especially during the Sasanian era, they were often framed as angels to make them more understandable in a monotheistic context.
Let's get into a few of the key ones mentioned in the sources. We have to start with Mithra. He's a huge figure.
Mithra is monumental. His worship predates Zarathustra, but he was so important, he remains central to the faith.
It's connected to the sun, right?
Intrinsically, but specifically the light that comes before the sun. The first rays of sunrise. But he is so much more than a solar deity. He is the guardian of covenants, of contracts, of truth.
He has some amazing titles in the texts.
He does. One is Varugavyuti, one who presides over wide pasture lands, which signals his role as a protector of life and sustenance. And he's also just called Payu, the protector.
So he's essentially the cosmic policeman. He ensures that all contracts, whether they're between humans or between humans and the divine, are upheld.
That's his core function. Break a promise, and you answer to Mithra. Then you have Arduis Sura Anahita,
The great goddess of the waters.
the Yasht dedicated to her, Yash 5, describes her in these incredible, vivid details. A beautiful, noble maiden driving a chariot pulled by 4 white horses.
And the horses are wind, rain, cloud, and sleet.
Yes. And it's interesting, the sources say that ancient kings and heroes would sacrifice to her before going into battle against the Devas.
A water goddess for military success. That seems like an odd connection.
But think about it. Water is the source of all life and purity. By sacrificing to her, a king was ensuring the moral purity and strength of his cause. You need a pure foundation to achieve a righteous victory.
That makes sense. And her influence is literally built into their sacred architecture.
It is. Traditionally, Zoroastrian fire temples are constructed near a spring or a river, linking her domain of water directly to the ritual center of the fire itself.
And our third example of a Yazada.
Virthrana, the personification of victory.
His name is pretty direct.
It's about as direct as you can get. It means the smashing of resistance or the smashing of obstruction. He's the mighty deity of war. He was so popular that many later rulers, especially after the Achaemenids, took his name or used his symbols.
And he doesn't just appear in one form.
No, the texts say he appears in 10 different forms: a swift wind, a bull, a camel, a boar, each one demonstrating a different aspect of victorious power. He's pure, unstoppable force for good.
Okay, so we have this incredibly detailed hierarchy of divine beings, the forces of light. But the opposition, commanded by Angra Mainyu, has to be equally structured. Let's talk about the Daivas.
The Daivas are the evil counterparts, the demons. But their nature actually evolves over time in the texts.
How so?
In the Gathas, the earliest layer, they aren't just, abstract monsters. They were explicitly linked to the destructive, predatory society that Zarathustra was actively preaching against.
So they were tied to a wicked priesthood, the Karpan.
Exactly. The Karpan promoted violence, especially against cattle, which was the lifeblood of their pastoral society. The Daivas were the false gods they worshipped.
So initially, Daiva was more of a theological label for bad human choices, for evil rulers, for false gods. Less cosmic demon, more social ill personified.
That's a crucial distinction to make. They were the gods of the old pre-Zoroastrian religion that the prophet rejected. But later, especially in the Pahlavi texts from the Sasanian period, their identity solidifies.
They become full-blown personified demons.
Explicitly created by Ahriman to oppose the good forces. The Bundahishan, a later text, maps this out perfectly. It lists 6 chief devas who are the direct adversaries of the 6 holy immortals.
So for Vuhumano, the good mind.
You have Akuman, the evil mind, a perfect, symmetrical opposition.
Can you give us a couple of vivid examples of these later demons?
Oh, certainly. You have Azidehaka, the terrible 3-headed serpent monster from mythology, a classic dragon figure.
Right.
But an even better example, I think, is Apayosha, the deva of drought.
The enemy of rain.
The enemy of rain. And the mythology describes this incredible 3-day battle between Apayosha and the Zarathustra.
Tishria represents the star Sirius, which is associated with the coming of the rains.
Exactly. But what's so fascinating is that Tishria doesn't just win automatically.
He struggles.
He struggles mightily. And the sources tell us he only wins after Ahura Mazda himself performs a sacrifice to grant Tishria the strength he needs to overcome Apayosha.
Wow. So even the gods need help. It shows that this cosmic war is active, it's ongoing, and the outcome isn't always a foregone conclusion.
It's not. It reinforces that every action, every prayer, every sacrifice matters. It can literally tip the balance in these cosmic battles. And that dynamic cosmology is what gives the faith its incredible moral weight.
It sets the stage perfectly for what we need to discuss next.
Yeah.
The words themselves, the foundational texts that chronicle this entire war, the Avesta.
At the very heart of the Avesta, the Zoroastrian sacred scriptures, you find the Gathas.
And these aren't just ancient hymns. They're considered the direct, divinely inspired words of Zarathustra himself.
That's right. The sources call them thought-provoking songs, or mantra.
And that word mantra, it implies a different relationship with the text than just, reading a history book.
It absolutely does. The root of mantra means to think or to contemplate. These are deeply spiritual, often very complex poetic expressions. They seem to capture the prophet's own intense dialogues with Ahura Mazda.
So they're designed to be contemplated, not just recited by rote. They're like weapons for the mind.
That's a great way to think of it. And one of the most brilliant insights from the sources is about the deliberate universality that's woven into the Gathas. This wasn't an accident.
It seems like a very conscious theological choice.
It had to be. The texts intentionally avoid dictating really specific rules for day-to-day life. Zarathustra doesn't say, you must eat this, or you must wear that, or here are the rules for retirement, because he understood that societies and civilizations constantly change. If the divine law was tied to the specific social norms of ancient Iran, the message would become obsolete in a few hundred years.
By keeping the focus on the ethical core, the threefold path of good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, he ensured its relevance forever. It doesn't matter if you're living in the Achaemenid Empire or in modern-day Mumbai.
The universal moral goal is set, but without a manual that would be, technologically or socially outdated almost immediately. It's incredibly forward-thinking.
And central to this whole moral framework is the most sacred formula in the faith, the Ahunavarya.
Often chanted as Yatha Ahuvaryo.
What's the spiritual power that's encapsulated in this mantra? What does it actually mean?
It represents the choice of the Lord. It's an affirmation of the supremacy of righteous authority, the authority chosen for virtue. And it establishes that the dominion of God is achieved through actions performed for the wise one.
So it's a call to action.
It is. The sources confirm that Parsis today still invoke this mantra for spiritual strength before any major task or difficulty. It's the verbal equivalent of putting on your shield for the cosmic war.
It reinforces the need for both ethical leadership and personal righteous action.
Precisely. Now, moving from the theology of the text to the physical history of the texts themselves, well, that's where we get into some serious academic drama.
The textual disputes. We have to talk about the Arsacitivesta controversy.
Oh, yes. This was a hypothesis put forward by Friedrich Karl Andreas in the early 20th century, and it dominated Iranian studies for decades.
So what was his argument?
Andreas argued that the Avestan text we have today, the Vulgate, is full of errors. And he claimed these errors were introduced during a clumsy phonetic transcription of a much earlier prototype text.
The so-called Arsacitivesta.
The Arsacitivesta. And if that earlier text was written in a script like Pahlavi, which famously lacks marked vowels and uses single letters for multiple different sounds,
then transcription errors would be basically inevitable. Scribes wouldn't know the exact ancient pronunciation.
that was the theory, that scribes, unsure of the pronunciation because of the ambiguous script, just guessed and substituted the wrong letters, corrupting the original meaning. It was a very compelling theory.
But scholarship moves on. This theory was pretty heavily critiqued later, wasn't it?
It was. The counter-argument, led by scholars like H.W. Bailey and W.B. Henning, was devastating to the theory. They argued that even if an Arsacid text did exist, its practical influence on the language we have now was minimal.
So how did they prove that?
Through incredibly rigorous philological inspection, they went through the text and demonstrated that the number of linguistic errors, you could say, with any certainty came from a bad transcription was actually very, very small. And that number kept shrinking with more research.
So the conclusion wasn't that the older text didn't exist, necessarily.
Right. It was more that the Avestan text we actually have is much more linguistically sound than Andreas had suggested. It refocused everyone's efforts away from chasing this, lost perfect archetype and back to interpreting the complex text we actually possess.
Which brings us to another huge scholarly conflict from the 19th century. The debate over how to even translate the Avesta correctly.
The polemics of interpretation. This was a massive clash of methodologies.
It sounds like it was a battle between historical reverence and linguistic science.
In a way, yes. On one side, you had the traditional school, scholars like Spiegel and Darmestetter. Their belief was that the Avesta was so ancient and difficult that you could only understand it through the lens of the native Pahlavi commentary, the Zand.
So their method was to trust the internal tradition, the interpretations passed down by the priests for centuries.
Trust the priests. But the opposing Vedic school, led by figures like Carl Friedrich Geldner, was deeply skeptical of that.
Why?
They saw the Pahlavi commentary as potentially unreliable, written centuries later by priests who might not have understood the original Gathic language perfectly themselves. The Vedic school argued the only objective way was purely etymological.
Meaning,
you compare the Avestan words directly to their linguistic cousins in Vedic Sanskrit. Since they share a common ancestor, you could, in theory, reconstruct the original, unadulterated meaning of the words scientifically.
I can imagine the two methodologies produced wildly different translations of the same passages.
Wildly different. And the conflict was fierce, often very personal, but eventually a modern consensus emerged.
Middle ground.
A more nuanced approach. We now accept that the Pahlavi commentary is absolutely essential for understanding the later texts, the ones dealing with ritual law, like the Vidoded.
For the older material.
For the older Gathic core and for the Yasna, the Pahlavi commentary is, and this is a quote from our source materials evaluation, absolutely devoid of any value.
Wow.
It just shows that you can't use one interpretive key for the whole Avesta. Different parts require different tools. And this critical approach is what finally gave us monumental works like Geldner's Critical Edition, which gave scholars the independent tools they needed.
It's just amazing how much work went into preserving and understanding a text that really only became widely available in the West in the 1760s. The resilience of the text really mirrors the resilience of the faith itself.
And that resilience is expressed so profoundly through their rituals, especially the rituals centered on the most sacred and visible element of all, fire, Atar.
Now, fire is often misunderstood by outsiders. It's not just a symbol of God, is it? The sources are clear. It's both a sacred element and a deity.
It has a unique dual role. It's considered the visible presence of Ahura Mazda on Earth, in some texts, even the son of Ahura Mazda, and it serves as the intermediary between heaven and earth, between humans and the gods.
Very similar to the role of Agni in the Vedic tradition.
Very similar. And this intense reverence leads to incredibly stringent ritual requirements.
And the protection of the fire is paramount.
Absolutely. A sacred fire must be maintained perpetually, and it has to be protected from any and all pollutants. Unclean breath, a corpse, any impure material. Priests or mobeds dedicate their lives to the rituals that ensure the fire's sanctity.
So every fire, from a small hearth in a home to the great temple fires, is a manifestation of a living deity.
A living deity and an active force for good. And this veneration reached its absolute apex in ancient Iran with the legendary Great Fires.
The three royal fires of the Sasanian Empire.
A Dur-Burzan Mir for farmers, a Dur-Farnbag for priests, and a Dur-Gushnasp for the warrior class. These weren't just fires, they were seen as divine entities, said to have come directly from Ahura Mazda himself.
They were major pilgrimage sites, symbolizing the direct link between divine power and imperial rule.
And that deep, continuous spiritual significance is still evident today, even in the modern diaspora.
You're talking about the 2017 Mumbai metro protests.
It's a perfect modern example. The Parsi community rallied together because they feared the underground construction would damage their ancient fire temples. But it wasn't just about physical damage.
No, it was spiritual.
It was a genuine fear that the vibrations and the disruption would diminish the spiritual and protective power of the consecrated flames that have been burning perpetually inside. For them, that fire is an active force shielding their community.
An amazing continuity of belief. Now, beyond the eternal fire, the faith marks the progression of life with some very distinct rites of passage. The initiation ceremony is the big one.
The Navjote, or Sedrapushi. It usually happens when a child is between 7 and 10 years old, and this is the moment they officially join the religious community.
And they receive two incredibly important garments.
The Sedra, which is a white muslin undershirt, and the Kusti, the sacred cord.
And the Kusti isn't just an accessory, it's a tool for daily spiritual practice.
It absolutely is. It represents the individual's commitment. The child is taught to untie and retie the Kusti every day during prayers. They wrap around their waist 3 times.
Signifying the 3 core ethical tenets.
Humata, huksta, huvarshta. Good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. The whole act of knotting it is a constant physical, disciplined reminder of their core moral obligation, taken straight from the Gathas.
Then we move to the end of life, where the funeral rituals are just completely unique in their commitment to protecting the purity of the sacred elements.
This brings us to the historical practice of sky burial atop the Towers of Silence, the Dokmas.
And this method was designed specifically to avoid contaminating the earth, which burial does, or fire, which cremation does.
Exactly. The corpse is seen as being highly polluting because it's the site of Ahriman's temporary victory, the decay. So the body is exposed to the sun and to scavenger birds, ensuring a disposal that is both sanitary and spiritually harmless to the sacred elements.
And while that practice is largely gone now, the underlying principle of sanitary disposal remains. So once the physical life ends, the focus shifts entirely to the soul's journey. Let's walk through the judgment at the Chinvat Bridge.
The journey starts right away, but the judgment is an instant. For 3 days, the soul stays near the body, under the protection of the Zarathustra,
The protector of the righteous and the commander against demons.
Yes. All the ceremonies in those first 3 days are performed in his honor. Then, at the dawn of the 4th day, the soul travels to the Invato Shurtu.
The bridge of elucidation, or the bridge of selection. This is the moment of reckoning.
It is, and 3 judges preside over it. Mithra, the guardian of covenants, Sarosha, the protector, and Rashnu, the angel of justice. They are completely impartial. They weigh the totality of a person's life.
And then the soul's entire life, its moral character, is manifested in this incredible visual form, the Dhanaya.
The Dhanaya is maybe the most profound concept here. It's the soul's inner self, its conscience, its very essence made visible.
So for the good soul.
For the good soul, their lifetime of good thoughts, words, and deeds manifests as a luminous, beautiful maiden. It's their own inner self greeting them. And she leads the soul across the bridge, which miraculously widens for them, onto the final reward.
The house of song. Paradise. The realm of Ahura Mazda.
And for the wicked soul, it is the terrifying reverse.
Their Dina appears as what?
As a gloomy, hateful, deformed old hag, their own accumulated misdeeds personified. And she leads them to the bridge, which narrows to the width of a razor's edge until the soul falls off into the abyss.
Towards the house of lies, hell.
And the sources are very clear that this outcome is based on a precise accounting. It's terrifyingly meritocratic.
What do you mean by that?
If your good deeds outweigh your misdeeds, even by a single tiny particle, you cross to the house of song.
And if not?
If misdeeds outweigh good, even by that same tiny particle, you fall into hell. And there's a third option.
For those in the middle.
If the deeds balance exactly, the soul goes to a place called Hammerstagen, a kind of purgatorial realm. And they wait there until the final renovation of the world, the Fresche Careti.
This incredible emphasis on individual moral responsibility, where every single action has a specific weight. This is the core idea that so profoundly influenced later monotheistic religions.
It absolutely is. And to understand how this faith was put into practice on a grand scale, we have to look at its imperial peak under the Sasanian Empire,
which lasted from 2234 to 651 CE. This was the period where Zoroastrianism was codified, formalized, and became a structured state religion.
Which meant that the entire Sasanian legal system was built on a religious foundation. It all came back to the Avesta and the Pahlavi commentaries written by priestly scholars.
And their main job was to adapt these ancient religious prescriptions into a practical legal code for a complex empire.
A huge challenge. They had three sources of authority: the Avesta itself, the Pahlavi commentary, and the consensus of the righteous priesthood. And the system they built was incredibly detailed.
It distinguished between all kinds of legal statuses: free men, different types of slaves.
Right, even a category called slaves of the fire, Anshurga Atakshe. And it had very specific rules for succession rights, all based on familial and religious duty.
The sources show how deeply this religious obligation was built into property law. An estate wasn't just passed down, it had to be divided for specific spiritual purposes.
The total estate, the Abarmand, was meticulously divided. A crucial portion was set aside as pad ruan,
Property for the soul.
pious endowments. Money and land dedicated specifically to funding the cult of the deceased person's soul to ensure rituals would continue to be performed for them.
And then there was this other category, pad sturi.
Pad sturi was property set aside to ensure the continuation of the family name. If a man died without any sons, the legal system required a steward, a stir, to be appointed.
Usually a relative.
Usually. And that steward's legal and religious obligation was to produce a child in the deceased's name to carry on the lineage. The property was held in trust to support this. It shows an absolute commitment to maintaining cosmic order through family continuation.
And society itself was a reflection of this rigid religious structure.
A very rigid four-class social structure. You had the priests, the Asranin, the warriors, Artestran, the commoners like farmers, Wastarioshan, and the artisans, Hutukshan.
With King of Kings, the Shanansha, ruling over everyone.
Exactly, but what's interesting is that despite this religious rigidity, the Sasanian kings were great patrons of high culture. Khosrow I, for example, funded the translation of Plato and Aristotle into Pahlavi.
But even at the peak of its imperial power, the faith's core dualism faced a major internal theological challenge.
Zoroastrianism.
What was Zoroastrianism?
It was maybe the most serious philosophical threat to Orthodox Zoroastrianism because it questioned the very nature of Ahura Mazda and Ahriman. It was a theological movement trying to solve the problem of evil. If Ahura Mazda is all good, where did his evil opposite come from?
So Zoroastrianism proposed a new higher power. Zervan, time.
Exactly. In this variant, Zervan, or infinite time, is the truly pre-existing supreme deity. And the story goes that Zervan sacrifices for 1,000 years to have a son, Ormazd, the good spirit.
But something goes wrong.
Halfway through, Zervan has a moment of doubt. He wonders if the sacrifice will even work. And in that moment of doubt, a second son is conceived, Ahriman, the evil spirit.
So it turns the fundamental dualism into a kind of primordial monotheism, but one rooted in fatalism. What were the implications of that?
The implications were enormous, especially for human free will.
Because if time preceded and created both good and evil,
then the universe becomes fundamentally fatalistic. The sources explain this through astrology. The fixed stars, the constellations, were on Ormaz's side, but the wandering planets were on Ahriman's side.
Meaning planetary influence could interfere with your destiny, making free will an illusion. Your fate was already written by time and the cosmos.
It's a complete departure from the Gathic focus on inescapable moral choice at the Chinvat Bridge. Zervanism basically negates the entire religious requirement for active moral selection.
It's easy to see why the Orthodox tradition eventually marginalized it.
It did, but not before Zervanism flourished for centuries under the Sasanians. But the external threat proved to be the ultimate test. After the Muslim conquest of Persia in 651 CE, the faith began its long, sharp decline in its own homeland.
The sources detail a very difficult situation for the Zoroastrians who remained.
The new Islamic rulers granted them protected status as dhimmi, But the pressure to convert was relentless. There was a high poll tax, the jizya, social discrimination. Life became increasingly unsustainable.
And this pressure is what prompts one of the most remarkable journeys in religious history.
And the flight to India. These refugees from the province of Pars or Fars would become known as the Parsis.
And their story is told in the Kisai Sanjan, the story of Sanjan.
Sometime around the 9th or 10th century, these groups fled Persia by sea. They eventually landed on the west coast of India in Gujarat. And the Kisa describes their meeting with the local Hindu ruler, Jadhav Rana,
Who was understandably wary of these newcomers.
very wary. He asked them to explain their religion, and he set down 5 specific conditions for them to be allowed to settle.
What were they?
The Parsis had to adopt the local language, Gujarati. Their women had to wear the local sari. They had to surrender all their weapons. Their wedding processions could only happen after sunset, and they had to explain their doctrines.
And the Parsi leader agreed to all of it.
Agreed to all of it, signifying their commitment to peaceful integration while fiercely protecting the core of their faith, the sacred fire and the texts.
And the Kisai Sanjan also tells this incredible story of their loyalty to their new home centuries later.
The battle at Sanjan. The Parsis fought alongside the local Hindus to defend the area from the army of the Ghaznavid Sultanate. And the narrative is framed with this epic imagery, almost like the Great Persian epic, the Sanama.
The invading army is described as advancing like a black cloud.
And the Parsi leader, a man named Ardashir, is memorialized as a true hero. He's depicted charging into battle like a lion to defend his community and his allies.
He dies heroically.
He does. The defenders are ultimately defeated, and Ardashir is struck by an arrow and falls from his horse. But the story of his bravery cemented the Parsi reputation in India as a loyal, resilient, and honorable community.
And after this, the community really flourished. They settled in Gujarat and later Mumbai, becoming renowned for commerce and especially for philanthropy.
17th century European travelers who visited Surat consistently wrote about their prosperity and their incredible ethics. John Ovington wrote that they leave no man destitute of relief nor suffer a beggar in their tribe.
Their success in shipbuilding, textiles, and trade allowed them to build a powerful community that fearfully preserved its faith in exile.
And today, the global Zoroastrian population is small, maybe 120,000 to 200,000 people, but that resilience continues to demand adaptation in the modern world.
We see that in the internal conflicts they face. The dogma practice is very difficult to maintain now, so there's a serious debate about allowing cremation or burial.
Which traditionally would violate the principle of not defiling fire or earth. It's a huge theological challenge.
And we also see adaptation in roles that were once restricted by lineage.
Absolutely. There's a growing movement in some communities to train women for priestly roles, which challenges the strict hereditary structure of the mobeds. It shows this necessary balance, trying to maintain the core theology while addressing modern needs.
But even today, as that Mumbai Metro protest showed, their core reverence for the sacred fire, for Atar as an active divine protector, remains completely undiminished.
It's a remarkable testament to the strength of a faith whose foundations were laid in a completely different world.
So we've completed this journey across millennia. We've charted the eternal conflict between Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu. We've decoded the elegant structure of the divine world.
Navigated the intense academic challenges of the Avesta, saw the faith flourish and face internal threats like Zoroastrianism, and then survived this epic displacement to thrive as a global Parsi community.
And what connects all of it, from the dual triads of the Amesha to Sasanian property law, is this coherent, enduring narrative of absolute personal responsibility.
Every ritual, every law, every single thought is an action in this cosmic war. And if we synthesize this entire deep dive, the ultimate message has to circle back to that core Gathic ideal we discussed.
The Dana, the inner self, the conscience at the Chinvat Bridge.
The judgment, as we detailed, relies entirely on the soul's own internal accounting. The sources specifically say that the soul alone sees and perceives all before the bridge.
Which implies the judgment isn't delivered by some external judge reading off a list. It's an internal revelation. The soul judges itself.
Exactly. And if you remember that the Gathas intentionally avoided rigid external laws about daily life to ensure their universality, well, then the ultimate guidance for the Zoroastrian path has to be entirely internal.
The path to salvation is inherently personal. It's between you and your own conscience.
So the final provocative thought for you, the listener, is this. The luminosity of that beautiful maiden or the ugliness of that hateful hag at the Chinvat Bridge. It's nothing more than the soul seeing the accumulated truth of its own choices for the very first time. The dyad challenges the need for any external institutional direction, placing the entire burden and the glorious freedom of a fulfilled life squarely on the quality of one's own inner choice.
Thanks for tuning into Sonara's Deep Dive. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of our future episodes. I bring you fresh content every week. Thanks for listening.